A silent stone city rises from the African savanna. This is Great Zimbabwe, and its story defies everything you might assume. You are about to uncover the true history of a stunning African empire that mastered trade, engineered monumental walls without a drop of mortar, and then faded into mystery, leaving a legacy so powerful it was stolen and denied. By the end, you will know the real people behind these ruins and the shocking reasons their achievement was almost erased from history. We will explore why a civilization of such wealth and skill simply walked away from its greatest creation. What does a lost city tell us about the stories we choose to believe? Standing before the ruins of Great Zimbabwe is an experience that humbles you. The first thing you notice is the silence, a deep quiet broken only by the wind whispering through ancient stone. Then your eyes adjust and the scale of it all hits you. You are looking at walls, but these are not simple fences. They are monumental, curving barriers of granite, some over 30 feet high and 20 feet thick at the base. They weave through the landscape without a single drop of mortar holding them together. Each stone was carefully selected, shaped by hand, and fitted so perfectly that these structures have stood for centuries. Your gaze travels up to the hill complex, a fortress of granite boulders and man-made walls perched high above the valley, watching over everything. And then, within the vast Great Enclosure, you see it, the mysterious conical tower. It rises like a solid, smooth sentinel, its purpose completely unknown. This city sprawled across nearly 1,800 acres. That is larger than many modern towns. So the questions come, immediate and overwhelming. Who had the vision, the organization, and the sheer skill to create this? How did they move and shape all this stone? And the most haunting question of all, why did they leave? For centuries, European explorers and colonists who stumbled upon these ruins could not believe their eyes. The idea that an indigenous African civilization could achieve such architectural and artistic sophistication was unthinkable to them, so they invented other builders. They claimed it was the lost palace of the biblical Queen of Sheba. They suggested it was an outpost of ancient Phoenicians or Arabs. These were not just incorrect guesses. They were active, racist denials of African history, an attempt to steal a magnificent achievement and credit it to someone else. This is where our mystery truly begins, not just in the stones, but in the story we have to reclaim from those who tried to bury it. The truth of these stones was never lost to the people who lived in their shadow. The builders were the Shona people, ancestors of the vibrant communities that still call this region home. Their story is one of deep roots and remarkable innovation. The Shona are Bantu-speaking people whose ancestors began migrating into southeastern Africa over 2,000 years ago. They were not nomads, they were settlers who mastered the land, developing sophisticated Iron Age technology. They knew how to smelt iron to create stronger tools and weapons. They worked gold into intricate jewelry, and with that same practical genius, they learned to read the very bones of the earth, the granite that littered their landscape. This was not imported knowledge, it was a homegrown skill perfected over generations. Their society was complex and hierarchical, centered on sacred kingship and supported by a powerful economy. At the top was the Mambo, a divine king who ruled from Great Zimbabwe. Below him were the nobles, the priests, the artisans, and the vast majority of people, the farmers and cattle herders. Cattle were more than food, they were walking wealth, a living bank account that measured status and power, but the true engine of their empire was trade. Great Zimbabwe sat at the crossroads of a continent-spanning network. From the interior, they sent out gold, ivory, and copper. From the coast, merchants brought in luxurious fabrics, colorful glass beads from as far away as India and China, and prized Chinese celadon pottery. The city became a bustling, cosmopolitan hub, its wealth evident in every imported treasure found within its walls. The stonework itself is the ultimate testament to their identity. The techniques used at Great Zimbabwe are found in smaller, older Shona settlements throughout the region. The style of building, the way walls gracefully curve and follow the natural contours of the land, is uniquely and undeniably African. So when you look at the Great Enclosure, you are not looking at a mysterious outpost of a foreign kingdom. You are looking at the capital of a mighty, homegrown empire built by Shona hands for a Shona king funded by Shona trade. This was their stunning achievement, and this is precisely why for so long others tried to claim it. But to understand the mind of this empire, you must climb. Leaving the valley floor, you ascend a winding path up a steep, natural granite hill. This is the hill complex, the oldest and most fortified part of the city. Reaching the top, you are not just entering a building, you are entering the very heart of Shona power. The air feels different up here, charged with a sense of authority and secrecy. The complex is not a single palace but a labyrinth, a maze of narrow stone passages, enclosed courtyards, and hidden chambers built in and around the massive granite boulders that crown the hill. These walls were not just for show, they were for defense, creating choke points where any attacker would be funneled into a deadly trap. This was a fortress utterly impregnable. But it was so much more than that. In the Shona language, this place was the Zimbabwe, the royal court, and here resided the Mutapa, the king. He was not merely a political leader. He was a sacred figure, the vital link between the living world and the ancestral spirits. The entire hill was a spiritual nexus. Within its most secluded enclosures, shielded from public view, the king and his spirit mediums would perform essential rituals. They would communicate with the ancestors to ensure good rains, fertile harvests, and the continued flow of gold and prosperity for the kingdom. His residence here was likely austere, befitting his divine role, yet positioned for ultimate control. From the highest points, the king could look out and see everything. His gaze would sweep over the entire valley, the bustling Great Enclosure below, the sprawling homesteads, the cattle pens, and the trade routes snaking toward the horizon. He saw all, and all could see his symbolic seat of power towering above them. It was a constant, silent reminder of his authority, and guarding this sacred space were the most famous symbols of Great Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwe birds. Carved from a dark, soapy stone called steatite, these majestic sculptures, each about 16 inches tall, stood on tall monoliths atop the hill. They are not naturalistic birds. They are powerful, stylized creatures, part eagle and part human, with lips instead of a beak and 5 toes per foot. Most scholars believe they represent sacred eagle spirits or shiri, acting as messengers to the gods and guardians of the king. To stand where they once stood is to stand at the spiritual pinnacle of an empire, where politics, religion, and the security of the state were woven together into stone. From that sacred hill, the king's gaze would have fallen upon his kingdom's grandest and most puzzling achievement. Down in the valley, embraced by a serpentine wall of grey granite, lies the Great Enclosure. This is the single largest ancient structure in sub-Saharan Africa. Its outer wall is a breathtaking feat, a curving ribbon of stone over 800 feet long and 36 feet high in places. Walking its perimeter, you feel dwarfed not just by its height but by its elegant, deliberate curve. It does not cut across the landscape, it flows with it, a man-made structure in perfect harmony with nature. And every single stone in that vast wall was placed by hand, fitted together with such precision that no mortar was ever needed. The gaps are so tight, legend says you cannot slide a knife blade between the rocks. This was not crude construction, this was master craftsmanship on a monumental scale. But what was it for? The mystery deepens inside. The Great Enclosure is not one giant empty space. It is a complex of smaller walls, platforms, and passages. Archaeologists have found the remains of dwellings here, suggesting it housed an elite community. Was this the royal town where the king's family and closest nobles lived in seclusion and luxury, separate from the commoners outside? or was it a ceremonial center, a sacred space for rituals too grand for the hilltop? The walls themselves may hold a clue. Their sheer, imposing presence had no real military purpose here in the valley. Instead, they seemed designed to inspire awe, to physically manifest the power and permanence of the king who commanded them. They are a symbol of majesty built in stone, and at the very heart of this labyrinth stands the greatest enigma of all, the conical tower. It rises over 30 feet tall, a smooth, solid column of stone. It is not hollow, it is filled from top to bottom with rubble and earth. You cannot enter it, it serves no practical storage purpose. So why build something so massive, so perfectly shaped with such immense effort? The theories are as fascinating as the tower itself. Some see it as a symbolic grain silo, representing the king's role as the provider for his people, the guarantor of abundance. Others suggest it may have had spiritual meaning, perhaps representing a connection between the earth and the heavens. Yet its very presence, solid and unyielding at the center of power, speaks most powerfully of permanence. In a world of mud and thatch, this tower declared that some things were built to last forever. It was a statement carved in stone for the ages, and it worked. We are still looking at it, wondering. Yet for all its grandeur, a city is not made of walls and towers alone. It is made of people, and the people of Great Zimbabwe live just beyond the shadow of the Great Enclosure, in a sprawling district known today as the Valley Ruins. Here, the stonework shifts from the monumental to the personal. Instead of towering, unbroken curves, you find lower, more intimate walls creating private family compounds. These enclosures were not fortresses, they were homes built from the same enduring granite but on a human scale. Within each stone perimeter stood clusters of round huts, their walls constructed from dogger, a sturdy mix of clay and gravel, and topped with conical thatched roofs. Walking through this area now, you can still see the circular foundations pressed into the earth like ghosts of daily life. This was not a haphazard village. The layout is orderly, with pathways winding between compounds, suggesting a planned urban community. The size and quality of these enclosures varied greatly. Some were spacious, with multiple huts and their own smaller, decorative stone walls. Others were more modest. This tells a clear story of social stratification. The city had its elite, living closer to the centers of power in larger compounds, and its skilled artisans and traders living in comfortable but smaller homes further out. It was a bustling, vibrant society. The air in these valleys would have been thick with the sounds and smells of industry. From one compound, you might hear the rhythmic tapping of a goldsmith, hammering raw nuggets into delicate beads, or the flat, thin sheets used for decoration. From another, the roar of a furnace and the clang of hammer on iron as a blacksmith forged tools, weapons, and the famous gono, the iron hose that were another form of currency. Potters shaped local clay into cooking vessels and ceremonial bowls, often imprinting them with beautiful geometric patterns. Weavers worked with fibers to create textiles and baskets. And everywhere there was trade. A merchant just returned from the coast might be unpacking a chest of glittering glass beads or a roll of fine cotton, while a local trader bargained over a bundle of ivory tusks. This was a city that worked, a hive of specialized activity where skill translated directly into status and wealth. The sheer organization required to feed, house, and employ thousands of people here is staggering. It points to a sophisticated administration, likely managed from the hilltop, that could coordinate resources, labor, and trade across a vast region. Great Zimbabwe was not just a sacred capital or a symbolic center. It was a living, breathing, working city, and its true heartbeat was here, in the valleys where its people built their lives. That mastery of granite began with a profound understanding of the material itself. The builders did not have to quarry stone from deep pits. They used what the land provided, exploiting a fascinating geological secret. The granite hills around them were naturally layered with cracks and fissures. To free a massive block, they would first locate these natural fault lines. Then, using fire, they would heat the surface of the rock. Once the granite was searing hot, they would douse it with cold water. The sudden, violent contraction caused by the temperature shock would make the rock split cleanly along its natural grain. It was a technique of controlled force, using physics as their primary tool. Once a manageable block was freed, the real artistry began. Using only harder stones as hammers, they would patiently peck away at the granite, shaping it into remarkably even, rectangular blocks. This was not quick work. It was a testament to immense patience and collective labor, likely organized through the royal system that could muster vast workforces for state projects. The true engineering genius, however, is revealed in the walls themselves. Look closely at any surviving section and you will see they are not just stacked. They are structured. The walls are actually double shells. The builders would erect two parallel faces of finely fitted blocks, leaving a hollow space between them. They would then carefully fill this cavity with a mix of smaller stones and rubble. This created a stable, reinforced core, preventing the wall from buckling under its own immense weight. But the builders went further. To manage the lateral forces and add incredible stability, they incorporated decorative patterns that were also structural marvels. You can see this in the famous chevron patterns, rows of stones set in a continuous V shape, like a stone zipper running along the face of a wall, or the herringbone style where stones are laid in alternating, slanted rows. These were not mere decoration. They acted like internal braces, distributing weight and stress evenly across the wall, locking the entire structure together. It was a brilliant fusion of art and engineering. This skill did not appear overnight. Archaeologists have identified three distinct phases of construction, named simply the P, Q, and R periods. The earliest, the P style, is found on the hill complex. These walls are simpler, using rougher, irregular blocks with more rubble filling. They are powerful but less refined. The Q style, seen in much of the Great Enclosure, shows a dramatic leap in skill. The blocks are more uniformly shaped and sized, the coursing is more regular, and the famous chevron patterns make their appearance. The final R style represents the absolute pinnacle. Here, the stones are so meticulously shaped and fitted that the walls present an almost seamless, flat surface. The joints are razor thin, and the patterns are executed with geometric perfection. This evolution is a clear record of centuries of accumulated knowledge, passed down through generations of masons who turned a local craft into a monumental art form. The ultimate test of their work has been time itself. These mortarless walls have endured for over 700 years. They have withstood seasonal rains, scorching heat, and even seismic activity. The reason lies in their brilliant flexibility. A wall held together with rigid mortar can crack and crumble when the ground shifts, but a dry stone wall like those at Great Zimbabwe can absorb small movements. Each stone can settle and adjust minutely against its neighbor, allowing the entire structure to flex without collapsing. It breathes with the earth. So when you see these towering curves still standing proud against the African sky, you are not just looking at old rocks. You are looking at the legacy of master engineers who understood their material, respected their environment, and built something meant to echo through the ages. Their silent, steadfast city is their final and most eloquent testimony. This immense wealth did not spring from the ground by magic. It flowed through the city like a river, and its source was gold. The kingdom of Great Zimbabwe sat atop a geological lottery. To the north and west, in the regions we now call Zimbabwe and parts of Mozambique, lay some of the richest gold deposits in the world. The Shona did not need deep mines. They extracted the precious metal from hundreds of small, shallow surface deposits and riverbeds, a technique known as alluvial mining. This gold was the lifeblood of their empire, but raw gold in the ground is just a rock. The genius of the Mambo and his advisors was in building and controlling the entire system that turned that rock into power. They established a monopoly. All gold belonged to the king. Local chiefs would send tribute in the form of gold dust and nuggets to the capital. In return, they received the king's protection and a share of the luxury goods that came from overseas. This was not a simple barter system. It was a sophisticated state-controlled economy. The gold would then travel from the interior down well-established trade routes guarded by the king's agents to the coast. Its destination was the Swahili port city of Sofala in modern-day Mozambique. Sofala was essentially Great Zimbabwe's gateway to the world. From its docks, Arab and Swahili dhows with their iconic triangular sails would carry the gold north along the African coast up to bustling ports like Kilwa and Mombasa. And from there, it entered the vast currents of Indian Ocean trade. This African gold fed markets thousands of miles away. It was minted into coins in Arabian kingdoms. It was woven into textiles in India. It was crafted into intricate ornaments for the elites of Southeast Asia and even reached the courts of China. Think about that for a moment. A king ruling from a stone city in the African interior was a key player in a global economic network that spanned half the planet. His wealth resonated in bazaars in Baghdad and ports in Gujarat. The proof of this incredible reach is found in the very soil of Great Zimbabwe. Archaeologists digging through the ruins have uncovered a treasure trove of imported goods that tell the story of these connections. They have found thousands of delicate glass beads, their colors still vibrant, which chemical analysis shows originated in India and even Southeast Asia. They have unearthed shards of exquisite Celadon pottery. Its distinctive pale green glaze a signature of Chinese kilns from the Song and Ming dynasties. They have discovered fragments of ornate Persian glass vessels and coins minted in distant Arab caliphates. These were not trade goods for the common people. These were the luxuries of the elite, symbols of status that demonstrated the king's ability to command the finest things the world had to offer. A noble in the valley ruins might sip from a Chinese porcelain cup while wearing Indian beads, all purchased with gold that came from a river a few days' walk away. This transforms our understanding of the ruins. Those silent stone walls were not the edge of the world. They were the thriving, cosmopolitan heart of a commercial empire. Great Zimbabwe was not an isolated mystery. It was a powerhouse, a central bank, and a royal court that dominated the trade of southeastern Africa for centuries. Its influence felt on continents its people never saw. Yet among all the treasures flowing through the city, the most powerful symbols never left the hilltop. Perched on tall stone monoliths overlooking the sacred complex stood the Zimbabwe birds. Carved from a single block of dark, polished soapstone, each sculpture is a masterpiece of spiritual fusion. They are not mere decorations. They are creatures of profound meaning, standing about 16 inches tall with a presence that feels far larger. Look closely at their form. They have the powerful, curved talons of an eagle gripping the tops of their pillars, but their bodies are stylized and sleek, and their faces are utterly unique. Instead of a beak, they have human-like lips set in a solemn, watchful expression. They have 5 toes on each foot, unlike any natural bird of prey. This is the key. They are not just birds, they are beings that exist between worlds, combining the majesty and far-seeing vision of the eagle with the essence of humanity. Most scholars believe they represent sacred eagle spirits known as Shiri, or perhaps even deified ancestors of the king. In Shona cosmology, birds are powerful messengers, able to travel between the earth and the spiritual realm of the skies. These stone sentinels, therefore, were the ultimate guardians. They served as intermediaries, carrying the prayers of the king and his people to the ancestral spirits and bringing back divine favor and protection. Placed at the highest, most sacred point of the city, they physically and spiritually connected the Mambo's earthly rule to the divine authority of the heavens. They were the silent guarantors of the kingdom's legitimacy and continuity, but their power made them a target. When European settlers arrived and began to systematically dismantle the true history of Great Zimbabwe, they did not just ignore the walls. They looted the most sacred objects. During the 1890s, a man named Willie Posselt, acting for a European museum, brazenly stole one of the birds from the hill. He reportedly had to saw it from its pillar. Others were taken in the following decades, ending up as curiosities in private collections and museums in South Africa and Europe, severed from their home and their meaning. Their theft was more than an act of plunder. It was the final symbolic severing of the modern Shona people from their own glorious past. After decades of struggle and negotiation, following Zimbabwe's hard-won independence, a powerful act of reclamation occurred. The birds began to come home. Today, 8 of the known carvings reside in Zimbabwe, a testament to cultural resilience. Their journey from sacred totem to looted artifact to national icon is complete. You can now see the distinct shape of the Zimbabwe bird on the national flag. It is stamped on the country's currency. It stands as the official national emblem. This is no accident. The bird that once watched over a king's spiritual authority now watches over a nation's identity. It is a permanent reminder that the true story of Great Zimbabwe and the people who built it can never be stolen away again. That iconic tower at the heart of the Great Enclosure has baffled experts for generations. Its solid, silent presence invites endless questions. Why would a civilization expend so much effort on a structure with no practical use? The leading theories are as fascinating as the tower itself, each offering a window into the worldview of the people who built it. One of the most compelling ideas is that it served as a symbolic grain silo. In a kingdom where agriculture and cattle were the foundation of wealth, the king's most sacred duty was to ensure the fertility of the land and the abundance of the harvest. A massive, immovable tower, shaped like the traditional granaries used to store millet and sorghum, would have been a powerful, permanent symbol of the Mambo's role as the provider for his people. It was not a storehouse but a stone promise of prosperity. Another theory points to a more elemental symbolism. Its distinct, towering shape has led many to see it as a phallic symbol, representing the king's potency, the continuity of his royal lineage, and the generative power of the state itself. In this reading, the tower is a declaration of enduring strength and fertility, carved in granite for all to see. Some researchers have looked to the skies for answers, proposing an astronomical function. Could specific alignments of the tower's shadow, or sightlines from its peak to the surrounding walls, have marked the solstices or the arrival of the vital rainy season? While no definitive alignments have been proven, the idea connects the tower to the Shona's deep understanding of natural cycles, essential for planting and ritual. And finally, there is the spiritual interpretation. Perhaps this solid column was a beacon, a direct conduit between the physical world of the living in the enclosure and the spiritual realm of the ancestors. It may have been the Axis Mundi, the sacred center point of their universe where prayers and offerings could ascend. The truth is, these theories are not mutually exclusive. In a culture where the king's political power, spiritual authority, and role as earthly provider were inseparable, the tower could have embodied all these meanings at once. Its very ambiguity is its power. It refuses a simple explanation, forcing us to sit with the mystery. That enduring enigma is a gift because it means we are still having a conversation with the builders across 7 centuries, trying to read the profound message they left in stone. The story of this empire's birth is not one of sudden conquest but of perfect timing. Around the year 1100, a remarkable convergence of good fortune and human ingenuity laid the foundation for everything that followed. The climate for centuries had been kind. Southern Africa entered a prolonged period of reliable rainfall and warmer temperatures. This was not a trivial change. It transformed the landscape, allowing grasslands to flourish and soil to remain fertile. For the Shona communities living in the region, this meant one thing above all else: abundance. Their herds of cattle, a breed known as Sanga with their distinctive long, curved horns, thrived. In this world, cattle were not just livestock, they were fuma, the ultimate form of wealth, a living, breathing currency. A man's status, his ability to marry, his political influence, all were measured by the size of his herd. Cattle provided meat, milk, and hides, but their true power was social. They created obligations and alliances. A powerful leader could lend cattle to loyal followers, binding them in a web of patronage and debt. This system created a stable, hierarchical society with a clear elite class who controlled the greatest herds. But climate and cattle alone do not build a stone city. The final, crucial piece was location. The Shona settlement that would become Great Zimbabwe sat at a geographical sweet spot. It was close enough to the gold fields of the interior to control their output, yet situated on the Highveld Plateau, a healthier environment than the malaria-prone lowlands leading to the coast. It became the natural nexus, the central exchange point where the riches of the African interior met the luxury goods of the Indian Ocean. The Mwenamutapa, the king, understood this power perfectly. He established a royal monopoly, all gold extracted from the rivers and shallow mines, all ivory from great elephant herds, and the surplus from the vast royal cattle herds belonged to the throne. Local chiefs would send tribute in these goods, and in return they received the king's protection and a share of the exotic imports. The Chinese porcelain, the Indian beads, the Persian glass. This system was a masterstroke. It centralized unimaginable wealth in the hands of the state while ensuring the loyalty of regional leaders. With this consolidated power, the king could now command the ultimate symbol of his authority, monumental labor. He did not need slaves. His control over resources meant he could support a large population of specialized craftsmen and summon communal labor for great projects. The stone walls began to rise not as military necessities, but as physical manifestations of this new, consolidated power. They were a declaration built from the very granite of the land and funded by gold, ivory, and cattle that a new order had arrived and it was here to stay. The king's authority was not just proclaimed by walls, it was woven into the very fabric of daily life. At the heart of this system was the Mwenamutapa, a title meaning Lord of the Plundered Lands or Great Raider, which speaks to the military power that underpinned his rule. But his role was far more complex than that of a simple warlord. He was the sacred pivot upon which the entire kingdom turned, a figure who blurred the line between man and deity. As a political leader, he controlled the military, appointed regional governors, and held the ultimate authority over trade and justice. Yet his spiritual power was even more profound. The Shona believed the king was the living embodiment of the state, directly connected to the royal ancestors who watched over the land. His physical health and spiritual purity were directly tied to the kingdom's fortune. If the king fell ill or his rituals were neglected, the entire realm could suffer drought, famine, or defeat. This made the royal court a place of intense ritual and constant ceremony. Each day likely began with offerings and consultations. Spirit mediums, individuals believed to be possessed by specific ancestral spirits, would have been crucial advisors. Diviners skilled in reading patterns in thrown bones or shells would be consulted to interpret the will of the ancestors for matters of state, war, or agriculture. The most important rituals, however, were performed by the king himself or his highest priests in the most secluded enclosures of the hill complex. These were not public spectacles. They were secret, sacred acts meant to maintain the cosmic order. The king would make offerings to petition for rain, to ensure the fertility of the herds and crops, and to secure victory in battle. The architecture of the city was a physical script of this power structure. By residing in the hill complex, the Mwenamutapa lived literally above everyone else. His subjects in the valley had to look up every single day to see the seat of his power silhouetted against the sky. The journey to petition the king was a physical climb, a pilgrimage that reinforced his elevated status with every step. The narrow, maze-like passages of the hill were not just defensive. They controlled access, creating a ritual of approach. A supplicant or ambassador would have been led through a winding, confined path, heightening the sense of awe and intimidation before finally emerging into the king's presence. Even the Great Enclosure below, with its towering, non-military walls, served this hierarchy. It physically separated the elite, the royal family, senior nobles, and top officials from the commoners in the valley ruins. This was a society where your place was written in stone, a daily, visible reminder that the king's connection to the divine was what held the world together, and that all prosperity flowed from the sacred heights down to the people below. For every noble in their stone enclosure and every goldsmith at their forge, there were hundreds of ordinary people whose labor made the city possible. Their world was not defined by carved soapstone or towering walls, but by the rhythm of the seasons and the needs of the earth. These were the farmers, the cattle herders, and the laborers who lived in smaller, scattered homesteads across the vast territory controlled by Great Zimbabwe. Their homes were the traditional round huts, built with poles and dogger, clustered in family compounds often surrounded by simple wooden palisades or low stone kraals for their animals. From the air, the landscape would have been dotted with these settlements, connected by well-worn paths that all eventually led back to the stone city. Life here revolved around two sacred pillars, grain and cattle. In their fields, women cultivated drought-resistant sorghum and millet, the staple grains that fed the kingdom. Using iron-bladed hoes, they worked the red earth, planting and harvesting according to cycles dictated by generations of knowledge and the advice of spirit mediums who predicted the rains. Men managed the herds, guiding the prized Sangha cattle to grazing lands and water sources. A family's wealth and security were measured in baskets of grain and the size of their herd. Their diet was simple but sustaining. Thick porridges made from sorghum, fermented millet beer, vegetables like pumpkins and beans, and on special occasions, the rich meat and milk from their cattle. They used tools forged from the city's iron hoes, axes, and spear points and pottery they often made themselves, decorated with beautiful stamped patterns. This was not a life of poverty, but one of self-sufficient tradition, yet they were inextricably bound to the stone city on the hill. Their connection was the system of tribute. Each homestead or village owed a portion of its surplus to the king. This was not necessarily a harsh tax, but a recognized obligation within a system of mutual benefit. A family might send a portion of their grain harvest, a pot of clarified butter, or several goats. Most importantly, they owed labor. When the king's messengers arrived, men would be called away from their fields for weeks at a time to contribute to the great communal projects, building a new section of wall, repairing a royal enclosure, or working in the royal fields. This labor tax was the invisible engine behind the monumental architecture. The stunning, mortarless walls were not built by slaves, but by citizens fulfilling their duty to the state, fed from the royal granaries stocked by the tribute of others. In return, the king's authority provided structure and security. His armies protected trade routes and grazing lands from rivals. His ritual specialists ensured, through ceremony and connection to the ancestors, that the rains would come and the land would be fertile. His control of trade brought in the salt, the exotic cloth, and the occasional luxury that might trickle down to a respected village headman. The grandeur of the stone city, therefore, stood upon a foundation of agricultural tribute and communal labor. The silent, imposing walls were ultimately a product of the harvest, but the story of this architectural genius does not end with the walls of Great Zimbabwe. The techniques and the very idea of building power in stone traveled. As the influence of the Mwenimutapa's kingdom radiated outward, and as new Shona states rose to prominence in later centuries, they carried this tradition with them, creating a family of stone cities across the landscape. Great Zimbabwe was the brilliant prototype, but it was not an isolated fluke. Its legacy is written in the ruins of places like Kami and Danangam, also known as Dhlo. These later capitals, built from the 15th to the 18th centuries, show a fascinating evolution. They adopted the core principles of their predecessor, the dry stone walling, the use of natural granite, the strategic hilltop locations, but they also made the style their own. At Komi, which became the capital of the Torwa state, you see a spectacular development in decoration. The builders here took the structural chevron and herringbone patterns of Great Zimbabwe and transformed them into elaborate, breathtaking art. They created intricate geometric mosaics on retaining walls and terraces, using differently colored stones to form dazzling checkered and chord patterns. It was as if the masons, having mastered the engineering, began to paint with stone. The walls at Danangam, a center for the Rosvi state, show a similar sophistication, with beautifully coursed stonework and complex platforms. These sites lacked the single, overwhelming scale of the Great Enclosure, but they compensated with a stunning refinement of detail. This architectural lineage proves a powerful point. The skill was not lost. It was a living craft passed down through generations of masons who served new kings in new capitals. The consistent thread is the material, the gray granite of the land, and the purpose. Each of these stone complexes was a deliberate statement of authority, a permanent seat for a ruler who wanted to root his power in the very bones of the earth. They are not copies, they are variations on a theme, proving that the vision born at Great Zimbabwe sparked a regional architectural language that endured for centuries. When you stand at Komi and run your hand over a cool, perfectly fitted stone set in an intricate chevron, you are touching the direct descendant of a 700-year-old idea. This continuity shatters any lingering notion of a one-off mystery. It reveals a flourishing, adaptable culture whose greatest innovations became the foundation for everything that followed. Yet even the most perfectly engineered system is vulnerable to the world around it. By the mid-15th century, the great stone city began to empty. The vibrant hum of the markets faded, the elite enclosures fell silent, and the royal court moved on. This was not a violent conquest, not a city sacked and burned. It was a slow, quiet departure, a gradual fading that makes the reason why all the more compelling. So what caused the fall of Great Zimbabwe? The leading theories paint a picture of an empire challenged by the very foundations of its success. The first and perhaps most intuitive explanation is environmental strain. For centuries, the city and its supporting hinterland had supported a large population and massive herds of cattle. Overgrazing by those prized Sangha cattle could have stripped the grasslands, leading to soil erosion. The demand for firewood to smelt iron, process gold, and cook for thousands might have slowly deforested the surrounding hills. This would have disrupted local rainfall patterns and reduced the land's ability to support agriculture. A series of droughts, possibly linked to broader climate shifts, could have been the final blow. An empire built on agricultural tribute cannot survive when the fields fail. The royal rituals for rain performed from the sacred hill may have ultimately gone unanswered. The second theory points to economic disruption. Great Zimbabwe's power was built on its control of the gold trade route to Sofala on the coast, but trade routes are not permanent. Political changes in the interior or the rise of new coastal ports further north could have offered merchants a faster, safer, or more profitable path to the sea. If the gold began to flow along a different river, bypassing the city entirely, the lifeblood of the kingdom would have slowly drained away. The king's monopoly would mean nothing if the gold was no longer coming to him. The flow of exotic beads and porcelain would have dwindled, and with it the prestige and economic glue that held the elite in place. Why live in a stone city if the wealth has moved elsewhere? A third possibility lies in the inherent fragility of royal power itself. The succession of the Mwenamutapa was likely a complex and dangerous affair. Without a clear, undisputed heir, the death of a king could plunge the court into factional strife, with different noble families or regional governors vying for control. A prolonged period of such political instability would have weakened central authority, making it impossible to organize large-scale labor projects or maintain secure trade routes. The kingdom might have simply fractured, with regional leaders breaking away to rule their own smaller territories, leaving the symbolic capital as an empty shell. The most likely truth, however, is not a single catastrophic cause, but a combination of these pressures. Imagine a sequence of weaker kings facing a series of poor harvests. As resources grew thin, their ability to reward loyal followers would have weakened. Discontented nobles, seeing their own tribute drying up, might have begun to look elsewhere for opportunity. At the same time, merchants may have found a more stable partner in a rival chiefdom, slowly diverting trade. This would have created a vicious cycle. Less trade meant fewer resources for the king, which led to less political control, which made the trade routes even less secure. The result was not a sudden, dramatic collapse, but a gradual unraveling. The population likely drifted away over decades, moving to smaller, more sustainable settlements. The royal court probably relocated to a new area with fresher pastures and better access to shifting trade networks, establishing a new capital. Great Zimbabwe was not destroyed. It was simply, thoughtfully left behind. Its stone walls, too solid to dismantle, remained as a testament to a glorious past, but the future had moved on. This slow fade is, in its own way, more profound than any apocalyptic end. It speaks to a civilization that made a rational choice to adapt, to leave a monument and seek new beginnings, ensuring their culture would endure even as their greatest city returned to silence. The silence that greeted European explorers in the late 19th century was not one of awe but of disbelief. When German geologist Karl Moch stumbled upon the ruins in 1871, he was confronted by a reality his worldview could not process. Here, in the heart of Africa, stood architecture of a scale and sophistication that rivaled monuments he knew from Europe. His own words betray the cognitive shock. He described the masonry as excellent, the design intelligent, but his conclusion was a product of his time, not the evidence. He declared, falsely, that the wood he found was from a Lebanese cedar, a tree not native to Africa. This tiny, imagined detail became the seed of a colossal lie. He proclaimed Great Zimbabwe was the biblical land of Ophir, the fortress of the Queen of Sheba. It was a fantasy, but it was a convenient one. Other voices followed, weaving ever more elaborate tales. Some said it was a mining outpost of King Solomon, built to extract the region's gold. Others insisted it was the work of ancient Phoenicians or early Arab traders. The common thread in every theory was glaring. None of them could conceive of black Africans as the architects. This was not an innocent mistake. It was a necessary myth for the colonial project then carving up the continent. If these magnificent ruins were the work of a lost white or Semitic civilization, then the land was not truly African. It was a forgotten inheritance that Europeans, as the new civilized power, could rightfully reclaim and control. The racist ideology of the time held that black people were incapable of such complex state building, so the evidence before their eyes had to be explained away. This intellectual theft was swiftly followed by physical plunder. The site became a free-for-all for treasure hunters and antiquarians. They tunneled into the ancient floors, shattering pottery and context in a frantic search for gold. They prized artifacts not for their historical meaning, but as exotic curiosities. Most infamously, as mentioned, the sacred Zimbabwe birds were sawed from their pillars and shipped overseas to private collections. Each looted object was a piece of the city's soul, ripped away. Even the early archaeological work, when it began, was often destructive and dismissive of the site's true origins. For decades, the official guidebooks and histories presented the Queen of Sheba story as fact. This was more than academic error. It was a deliberate, systemic erasure. By stealing the past, colonial powers aimed to justify their present rule. If Africans had no history of great achievement, then they needed European guidance. Great Zimbabwe's stones became a battlefield in a war over history itself, a war to deny a people their own glorious legacy and the pride that came with it. For decades, the ruins were treated as a puzzle box to be smashed open. Early excavations were less about understanding and more about treasure hunting, a frantic scramble for gold and exotic artifacts that could fit a preconceived story. Diggers hired by colonial interests and amateur antiquarians tunneled recklessly through ancient floors, shattering pottery, discarding animal bones, and mixing up the layers of history that held the real answers. Their goal was not to listen to the past, but to loot it for proof of their own fantasies. Every misplaced trowel cut through centuries of occupation like a knife through pages of a priceless manuscript, forever scrambling the narrative. This destructive period created a chaotic mess, but it also set the stage for a revolution in understanding. That revolution arrived in the form of a meticulous British archaeologist named Gertrude Catton Thompson. In 1929, she led the first major scientific expedition to Great Zimbabwe. Her approach was radically different. She was not looking for treasure. She was looking for truth, and she understood that truth lay in the careful, systematic study of context. Where others saw rubble, she saw a record. Her team excavated with painstaking precision, mapping every layer, recording the exact position of every artifact, no matter how mundane. And it was the ordinary objects that told the extraordinary story. She found that the material culture within the ruins, the style of pottery, the iron tools, the clay hut foundations was identical to that found in the smaller, simpler villages surrounding the site and across the region. There was no sudden, mysterious break suggesting a foreign builder. Instead, she saw a clear, continuous evolution from simple early settlements to the monumental stone architecture. Most damning for the external origin myths, she demonstrated that the imported treasures, the Chinese porcelain, the Persian glass, were found in the upper, more recent layers of the site. These luxuries did not arrive with the builders. They arrived centuries later as trade goods flowing to an already established and powerful African kingdom. In her seminal 1931 book, she stated her conclusion with unambiguous clarity. The ruins, she wrote, were the product of a native civilization. Her work was a thunderclap in the scholarly world, a rigorous, evidence-based rebuke to decades of racist speculation. Yet the myth was stubborn, propped up by political interests. The final, irrefutable nail in the coffin came with a new technology, radiocarbon dating. From the 1950s onward, scientists could analyze organic material from the site, charcoal from ancient hearths, seeds from food stores, bone from long-ago meals, and measure the decay of radioactive carbon to get a precise date. The results were conclusive. The major construction phases at Great Zimbabwe dated firmly between the years 1100 and 1450, the height of the medieval period in Europe. This timeline perfectly matched the archaeological sequence Catton Thompson had outlined. It placed the city's zenith centuries before significant Arab or Portuguese contact in the region, and millennia after any hypothetical Phoenician voyage. In the world of serious academia, the debate was over. The stones had finally been allowed to speak for themselves, and their testimony was clear. Every scientific tool confirmed that this was an indigenous African achievement, born in the medieval period, a contemporary of the great Gothic cathedrals of Europe. The racist theories were not just wrong, they were scientifically obsolete, yet having proven who built it and when, an even more intimate question remained. What was daily life actually like for the people who called this stone metropolis home? The story of the stones did not end with their abandonment. In the 20th century, they became the center of a new and powerful struggle, the fight for a nation's very soul. When the British South Africa Company, led by Cecil Rhodes, colonized the region, they named it Rhodesia in his honor. For the white minority government that followed, Great Zimbabwe was an acute embarrassment. Its existence challenged the core justification of their rule, the supposed civilizing mission. How could they claim to bring progress to a people who had already built a metropolis centuries before? Their solution was a campaign of quiet denial. Official guidebooks and school textbooks either clung to the discredited Queen of Sheba myth or downplayed the site's significance entirely. They treated it as a curious anomaly, a minor archaeological footnote, rather than the capital of a great civilization. The ruins were presented as a mystery belonging to everyone and no one, certainly not to the ancestors of the black majority living under colonial rule. It was a second erasure, this time not by speculation but by silence. This official silence, however, only amplified the ruins' symbolic power for those fighting for freedom. For the black nationalist movements, particularly the Zimbabwe African National Union, or ZANU, Great Zimbabwe was not a mystery, it was a manifesto. The name itself became a rallying cry. To call for Zimbabwe was to reject the colonial name of Rhodesia and to assert a deep, sovereign history that predated European maps. The Zimbabwe bird, that ancient stone guardian, was resurrected as a potent emblem of resistance. Its image began to appear on political posters, pamphlets, and banners. It was no longer just a sacred eagle spirit. It was transformed into a phoenix of national rebirth, a symbol of the glorious past that colonialism had tried to bury and which independence would restore. The ruins stood as irrefutable proof that the people of the land were capable of self-rule, of monumental achievement, of controlling their own destiny. This was not just political rhetoric, it was a reclamation of identity, weaponizing history against oppression. When independence finally dawned in April of 1980, the choice for the new nation's name was inevitable. Rhodesia was consigned to the history books and the Republic of Zimbabwe was born. The symbols chosen were equally deliberate. The Zimbabwe bird, once looted and exiled, now took its place at the center of the national flag and the country's coat of arms. The ruins themselves were declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site, their global importance officially recognized, but more importantly, they were embraced as the spiritual birthplace of the nation. School children now learned not about the Queen of Sheba, but about the Mwenimutapa and the Shona Empire. The site became a place of pilgrimage, not for foreign tourists seeking mystery, but for citizens seeking connection. To walk among the stones was to touch the proof of ancestral genius, to feel a profound pride that no colonial narrative could ever diminish. Great Zimbabwe had completed its long journey from a living capital to a silent ruin, to a looted artifact, and finally to an unshakable icon. Its walls, which had witnessed the rise and fall of kings, now stood as the permanent foundation for a modern nation's identity, a reminder that the most enduring power is not written in laws but carved in stone and reclaimed by memory. But preserving this legacy is a constant, quiet battle against time itself. The same sun that once warmed the stonemasons now beats down on their work, and the rains that fed the kingdom's crops now slowly eat away at its walls. The conservation of Great Zimbabwe is a story of modern science meeting ancient craftsmanship in a delicate dance to save something irreplaceable. The threats are both relentless and subtle. Thermal expansion is a silent enemy. Over centuries, the daily cycle of the African sun heating the granite and the cool nights contracting it causes tiny, cumulative stresses. Individual stones can slowly crack or shift out of alignment. More visibly, vegetation is a persistent foe. A single seed carried by wind or bird can lodge in a tiny crevice. As it grows, its roots act like hydraulic jacks, prying apart stones that have been fitted together for 700 years. A small shrub can become a destructive force. Then there is the pressure of the present, tourism. While vital for education and the local economy, the footfall of thousands of visitors each year causes gradual wear on ancient pathways and puts stress on fragile structures. Every touch, however gentle, transfers oils from skin to stone, and every step on an original floor compacted by centuries of use has an impact. The challenge for conservators is to find a perfect, impossible balance. They must make the site accessible so people can experience its power and learn its true history, while simultaneously protecting it from the damage that very access can cause. This often means making difficult choices, rerouting visitor paths, installing discreet protective barriers, or limiting access to the most sensitive areas. The work is guided by a fundamental principle: minimal intervention. The goal is not to rebuild Great Zimbabwe, but to stabilize it, to slow its return to nature so future generations can stand in awe. Remarkably, some of the most effective techniques are not modern inventions. They are revivals of traditional Shona dry stone walling knowledge. In restoration projects, local masons are often trained in the ancient methods, learning to identify original stone, understand the coursing patterns, and carefully dismantle and rebuild only the sections in danger of collapse. They use no mortar, just as the original builders did, ensuring any new work is both authentic and reversible. This is not just practical, it is profoundly respectful, reconnecting living communities with the skills of their ancestors. This global importance is formally recognized. Great Zimbabwe is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a designation that places it alongside wonders like the Pyramids of Giza and the Great Wall of China as part of the shared heritage of humanity. That title comes with a solemn responsibility, shared by the nation of Zimbabwe and the international community, to protect and preserve this treasure. It is a reminder that these silent stones are not just a national icon. They are a chapter in the story of human civilization itself, a testament to ingenuity that belongs to everyone. Their preservation is a promise we make to the past and a gift we protect for the future. Despite everything we now know, the stones of Great Zimbabwe still hold their secrets close. For every answer archaeology provides, a dozen intimate, human questions linger in the silent air. We can map the trade routes and date the walls, but we cannot hear the city's heartbeat. What did it actually sound like at the height of its power? Imagine the distant lowing of thousands of cattle from the royal herds, the constant tap-tap-tap of stonemasons shaping granite blocks, the murmur of bartering in a market filled with spices and fabrics, and the rhythmic chanting from a hidden ritual on the hill. What did it smell like? The scent of wood smoke and baking sorghum bread, the tang of hot iron from a blacksmith's forge, the earthy odor of wet clay, and the exotic perfume of imported incense burning in an elite enclosure. These sensory details are lost to us, the living texture of a city now silent. The purpose of specific structures remains debated. We have theories about the Great Enclosure and the conical tower, but can we ever be certain? Were there buildings whose functions we have completely misunderstood, spaces that served a purpose so unique to their culture that we simply cannot recognize it? And what of the rituals themselves? We know the king performed sacred ceremonies, but what words were spoken to the ancestors? What specific dances were performed? What offerings were made? And what did the people believe they witnessed in those secluded courtyards? The spiritual script of the city is written in a language we can only partially decipher. Then there is the tantalizing possibility of what still lies hidden. The early treasure hunters did catastrophic damage, but could they have missed something? Are there undiscovered chambers sealed behind walls or royal tombs hidden deep within the granite hill, untouched for centuries? Modern technology like ground-penetrating radar offers hope, suggesting there is much more beneath the surface than the visible ruins imply. Each unanswered question is not a failure of research. It is a gift. These mysteries are what keep Great Zimbabwe from becoming a static exhibit in a history book. They are what pull us back, inviting us to look closer, to wonder more deeply. They ensure the conversation between the past and the present never truly ends, that the city remains not a solved puzzle, but a living enigma that continues to challenge and inspire. While science maps the stones, memory weaves a different kind of map around them. For the Shona people, Great Zimbabwe is not a silent ruin waiting for explanation. It is a landscape alive with stories, a place where history breathes through the voices of grandmothers and the cautionary tales told around evening fires. This is the realm of oral tradition, a rich tapestry of folklore that offers a profoundly different layer of understanding. One persistent legend speaks of the original builders not as ordinary people, but as beings of immense power. Some stories say the walls rose on their own, the stones moving into place by supernatural command. Others tell of a great king who possessed a magical drum or a horn that could summon the labor of spirits to shape the granite. These are not literal accounts, but powerful metaphors. They express the sheer awe the ruins inspired in later generations, framing their construction as an act so monumental it could only belong to the realm of the extraordinary, to the time when ancestors walked with one foot in the spirit world. The tales of hidden treasure are especially vivid. It is said that when the people left, they concealed vast stores of gold and royal regalia within secret chambers in the hills or beneath the floors of the enclosures. But this wealth is never unprotected. The stories warn that these caches are guarded by powerful ancestral spirits, known as mashave, or by giant serpentine creatures. To seek the treasure without the proper ritual respect or with greed in your heart is to invite disaster. Many tales tell of foolish fortune hunters who, upon disturbing a sacred spot, were driven mad, stricken by illness, or simply vanished. These are not just adventure stories, they are a cultural protection system using the power of narrative to deter looting and teach respect for a place considered sacred. Then there are the stories connected to the water. Near the ruins are pools and streams, and these are often linked to the Njuzu, the water spirits of Shona cosmology. The Njuzu are beautiful, mysterious beings, often described as mermaid-like figures with long, dark hair. They are neither purely good nor evil, but powerful and capricious. Some oral histories suggest certain pools were portals to their underwater realms, and that the spiritual leaders of Great Zimbabwe could communicate with them. The Njuzu were believed to control the rains and the fertility of the land, a direct link to the kingdom's prosperity. A story might tell of a king who made a pact with the Njuzu to ensure good harvests, or of a person who was taken by the spirits to learn healing arts before being returned to the world. These narratives tie the stone city directly to the life-giving force of water, embedding it within a living, spiritual ecosystem. To hear these stories is to understand that for centuries, the people living in the shadow of the ruins never saw them as dead or abandoned. They were and are an active part of the spiritual landscape. The oral traditions do not contradict archaeology, they complement it. Where carbon dating gives us a year, a legend gives us a reason. Where a pottery shard shows trade, a story about a Njuzu explains the spiritual cost of that wealth. They represent a continuous thread of memory, a way of making sense of a monumental past on deeply human terms. This folklore is the emotional and cultural context that no excavation can ever fully uncover, reminding us that a civilization is remembered not just by what it built, but by the stories it leaves behind. The stones can only tell us so much. To truly grasp the empire's heartbeat, we must walk its streets when they were alive. Picture a sunrise over the valley, the first rays catching the highest walls and setting them ablaze in a warm, golden light. This is not the grey ruin of today, but a city reborn in color and sound. The granite is not dull. It is a tapestry of warm hues, russet browns, pale golds, and soft grays, each stone hand-picked for its place. And rising from behind those majestic, curving walls, thin columns of blue-gray smoke spiral into the morning air from 1,000 hearths and forges. The city is waking up. The soundscape is a layered symphony. From the valley ruins comes the distant, comfortable clamor of daily life. The chatter of women gathering water at the communal well, the laughter of children chasing each other between the round, thatched huts, the rhythmic scrape of a potter's tool shaping wet clay. A rooster crows somewhere, a blacksmith's hammer strikes iron with a sharp, ringing clang, followed by the hiss of hot metal plunged into water. Over it all, like a deep, constant bass note, is the lowing of cattle from the vast royal herds grazing beyond the city's edge. This is the sound of industry and community. Now shift your gaze to the Great Enclosure. Its towering walls are not a barrier to silence, but to privilege. Inside, the atmosphere is different, more orderly, more refined. In the spacious courtyards, elite women in brightly colored cotton wraps, adorned with strings of Indian glass beads that catch the light, move gracefully between tasks. The air here might carry the scent of exotic incense or the sweet, yeasty smell of millet beer brewing. In a shaded workshop, a master goldsmith, surrounded by apprentices, carefully heats a crucible over a charcoal fire. He pours the molten, sun-colored liquid into a mold, creating a delicate ceremonial pendant. The wealth of a continent is being transformed into art within these walls. And high above it all, the hill complex commands the scene. The narrow, maze-like passages are not empty. They are patrolled by the king's guards, men holding tall spears with iron tips, their posture erect and watchful. In a secluded courtyard shielded from view, a senior spirit medium, clad in a cloak of leopard skin, might be casting a set of divining bones onto a clean ox hide, interpreting their fall for a royal advisor. The sense of sacred power here is palpable, a quiet hum of authority that everyone in the valley below can feel. Then, a new sound cuts through the urban murmur, the deep, melodic tone of a wooden drum echoing from the hills. It is a signal. All eyes turn to the southern approach. A caravan is arriving. A line of porters, dozens strong, wins its way up the path toward the city gates. They are laden with heavy bundles, tusks of ivory, each one a monumental curve of creamy white, and rough leather sacks bulging with copper ingots and raw gold dust. Walking alongside them are traders in distinctive dress, their robes suggesting coastal origins. They lead donkeys carrying even more precious cargo, rolled bolts of fine cloth, sealed ceramic jars of spices, and small, sturdy chests that likely contain the most prized treasures of all, more of those brilliant glass beads and perhaps delicate porcelain from across the ocean. This is the moment the entire city was built for. The royal officials emerge to meet the caravan, inspecting the goods, negotiating, recording the exchange. The gold of the interior is meeting the luxuries of the world. For a moment, the economic engine of the kingdom is visible, tangible, and deafeningly loud. The silent, imposing walls we see today were merely the magnificent stage for this endless, vibrant drama of power, faith, and commerce. They held a living city, a breathing empire whose memory is etched not just in stone, but in the imagined echoes of 1,000 forgotten days. Great Zimbabwe did not rise in isolation. Its walls reached for the sky during the very centuries when humanity was stitching the world together through trade and ambition. While masons in Europe labored on soaring Gothic cathedrals like Notre Dame, and while the Khmer Empire was completing the final, breathtaking spires of Angkor Wat, another kind of sacred geometry was being perfected in the African savanna. Half a world away, the Inca were beginning their own story in stone at Cusco, and the Mali Empire under Mansa Musa was dazzling the Mediterranean with its legendary wealth. This was the medieval world, a time of powerful, interconnected kingdoms, and Great Zimbabwe was a central player in that global story. It was not a lonely outpost. It was a capital, a peer to these other great centers of civilization, each expressing power through its own unique genius. Europe built vertical wonders of faith in glass and stone. Southeast Asia carved temple mountains from the jungle. The Andes shaped mountainsides into terraced cities, and in southern Africa, the Shona mastered the dry stone wall, creating a sprawling urban complex that commanded the flow of gold across continents. This perspective changes everything. We must stop seeing Great Zimbabwe as an African mystery and start recognizing it as a medieval metropolis. Its timeline is the proof. From the 1200s through the 1400s, when Marco Polo was traveling the Silk Road and the Magna Carta was being signed, Great Zimbabwe was at its zenith. A Chinese porcelain cup found in its soil dates from the Song dynasty. Glass beads from India and Persia arrived during the height of the Islamic Golden Age. These artifacts are not random curiosities. They are receipts placing the city squarely within the ledgers of a connected world. The gold that left its control likely ended up in the markets of Cairo, Venice, and Baghdad, helping to fuel economies thousands of miles away. So when you stand before its ruins, you are not looking at a forgotten corner of history. You are looking at the southern anchor of a medieval global economy, a civilization that looked outward, traded across oceans, and expressed its sovereignty in a language of stone that deserves its rightful place alongside the castles, temples, and empires we already celebrate. Its silence today speaks not of irrelevance, but of a narrative interrupted, a story we are only now learning to hear in full. The path to Great Zimbabwe is a journey through a living landscape. You do not simply arrive at a parking lot and see the ruins. You approach them walking through the same sun-drenched grasslands and granite outcrops that have defined this place for a millennium. The modern entrance is humble, a gateway to another time. Your first steps onto the site are quiet, almost reverent. The air is dry and carries the scent of dust and dry grass. Then the gray stone walls begin to appear, rising from the earth not as a reconstructed set piece, but as a natural extension of the land itself. They feel ancient, not old. The first thing you will want to do is touch them. Go ahead. Place your palm flat against the sun-warmed granite. The stone is surprisingly cool beneath the surface, a testament to its density. Run your fingers along the joints between the blocks. The precision is humbling. You cannot slip a piece of paper into most of the seams. This tactile connection is immediate and profound. You are touching the same stones that Shona masons shaped and placed over 700 years ago. Their workmanship is right there under your hand, a silent conversation across centuries. Your visit will likely lead you first to the vast, open space of the Great Enclosure. Walking through its main entrance, you are funneled through a narrow, towering passageway. It is impossible not to feel the weight of history here. The walls curve around you, blocking out the modern world, creating a sense of seclusion and awe. Inside, the space opens up. You can see the foundations of ancient huts, the circular patterns pressed into the earth where families once lived. And there, at the heart of it all, stands the conical tower. Seeing it in photographs does no justice to its presence. It is solid, enigmatic, and powerfully calm. You can walk a full circle around it, and with each step, you might find yourself asking the same question that has puzzled visitors for generations. What were you for? The enclosure is a place for slow wandering. Find a quiet spot in the shade of the wall and just sit. Listen to the wind moving through the grass and the distant calls of birds. Let your mind fill in the silence with the imagined sounds of a thriving city. The chatter, the industry, the life that once animated these stones, but the true perspective comes from the climb. To understand the mind of the Mwenamutapa, you must ascend to the hill complex. The path is steep and winding, weaving between massive boulders and sections of the original defensive walls. It is a physical effort, and that is the point. As you climb, you gain a literal and figurative elevation. Stop to catch your breath and look back. The view unfolds gradually. First, you see the top of the Great Enclosure wall snaking through the trees below. Higher still, and the entire valley comes into view, a patchwork of green and gold with the stone ruins as its centerpiece. Reaching the summit is a reward. The breeze is stronger here, cooling the sweat on your skin. From the highest points, you command a 360-degree panorama. You can see why they chose this spot. You can watch over everything: the ruins, the modern town in the distance, the trade routes stretching to the horizon. It is a strategic masterpiece. Explore the maze of narrow passages and hidden chambers. stand in the sacred enclosures where the king performed his rituals and feel the profound silence that now resides there. This is where the Zimbabwe birds once stood guard, and the sense of spiritual gravity is palpable. Before you leave, a visit to the on-site museum is essential. It is here that the story becomes beautifully tangible. The museum houses a priceless collection of artifacts recovered from the ruins. You will see the elegant soapstone bowls, the iron hose used as currency, and the dazzling array of imported trade goods, the Chinese celadon, the Persian glass, the countless glass beads in every color. But the centerpiece, the emotional heart of the collection, is the display of the Zimbabwe birds. Seeing them up close in their homeland is a powerful moment. You can study the intricate carving, the human-like lips, the five-toed feet. These are not just sculptures, they are symbols of a reclaimed heritage returned to the soil from which they were born. Their presence in the museum completes the circle, connecting the spiritual artifact to the physical site just outside the door. As a visitor, you are a guest in a place that is both a national monument and a sacred landscape. The key is respectful curiosity. Stay on the marked paths to protect the fragile archaeology. Speak in hushed tones. This is not a theme park, it is a place of deep memory. Remember that for many local people, especially the Shona communities, Great Zimbabwe remains a spiritual site. It is woven into their identity and their stories. Your visit is a privilege. Take your time. Let the scale and the silence sink in. The magic of Great Zimbabwe is not in a single fact or theory, but in the overwhelming feeling it evokes, a feeling of connection to a sophisticated, powerful, and deeply human past that chose to express its greatness in stone. Walking back to the gate at the end of the day, with the late sun casting long shadows from the walls, you carry a new understanding. This is not a mystery to be solved, but an experience to be felt, a testament to ambition that still echoes on the wind. Great Zimbabwe's journey from a misunderstood ruin to a recognized capital is now complete. We have walked from the silent, sun-warmed stones back through time to the bustling markets and sacred hills of a mighty African empire. This was never a lost city of biblical kings or foreign explorers. It was the achievement of the Shona people, a testament to indigenous innovation, where master masons turned local granite into monumental walls without mortar, using a genius for engineering that still stands firm. We traced the economic power that built it, a kingdom that sat at the heart of global trade, its gold flowing to distant continents while luxuries from across the Indian Ocean graced its elite enclosures. And we uncovered a cultural sophistication woven into every aspect of life, from the spiritual authority of the Mwenimutapa to the vibrant daily rhythms of artisans, herders, and traders. This story does more than rewrite a chapter of history. It teaches us a profound lesson about identity and the danger of a single narrative. For centuries, biased views tried to steal this legacy, to deny a people their own glorious past to serve a political present. Great Zimbabwe's reclamation is a powerful reminder that history is not just about facts, but about who gets to tell the story. These stones challenge us to look beyond the myths we have inherited, to seek out the true voices of the past, and to recognize that human greatness has never been confined to one continent or culture. The mysteries here may never all be solved: the true purpose of the conical tower, the exact words of forgotten rituals, the full echo of the city's final days. And that is what makes history so compelling. It invites us to keep wondering, to keep exploring. So tell me, which mystery of Great Zimbabwe captured your imagination the most? Was it the silent sentinel of the tower, the guardianship of the Zimbabwe birds, or the sheer scale of the trade that connected this African capital to the world? Share your thoughts below, and if you want to join more adventures into the world's greatest historical mysteries, be sure to subscribe. Our journey through the hidden stories of our past is just beginning.